My name's Joel Pierre-Powell and I'm a software engineer. So growing up, I always loved Lego and I loved building things with different, like Duplo when I was a baby, and then the big, like the more adult Lego, as it were. And when I kind of got older, I was into computers a lot, and then I was gifted and talented in IT at my school, and it just I kind of fell into it. I had an uncle who was a software engineer, and I used to mess about with him every now and again, asking him questions like, oh, how do you do this? How do you do that? And then I just decided to pick it up myself when I was about 14. And yeah, and I just took it from there. I'm also completely self-taught. So everything I've learned and from my career so far has been me at a computer, just messing about, studying, trying to learn things as much as possible. And yeah. So secondary school, I picked geography. I did further IT, and then from secondary school into college, I did maths. I did economics, and I had this idea that I was going to become an accountant. So everything was very accountancy based, economics based, and everything like that. I thought I was all right with it. I then went into university and I studied accounting and finance, and I got my degree. But for the whole time I was at college and I was at uni, I was working on web development. I was building websites for people. I was honing my skills basically in my spare time. And then from then, so when I went to uni and I got my degree and everything, when I left, I had such a huge portfolio that I could walk into not a junior role, but a more mid role straight away, because I had all of the kind of evidence to support what I could do and what I knew. The first project, I built a website for my friend's mum. So her and her partner had a construction business, and I built their website. It wasn't the greatest. If I look back on it, I probably would be ashamed. But it's what obviously got me into it. I learned a lot of stuff on that first project. There's nothing better than actually just doing the thing that you're trying to build a career from. There's a lot of theory that you can learn at school and stuff like that, but it doesn't teach you what you actually need to do the job necessarily. Sometimes it teaches you a lot of the kind of background information that you might not necessarily need day to day. Web development and software engineering in general is kind of a role where you don't really do much work experience. You have to have a base knowledge, and once you have a base knowledge, you can kind of get paid and get by with that kind of that kind of foundational understanding. And then from there, so when I started out, it was about £100 for a 2-page website. Then it went to £400 when I got a bit better. And then as I got more and more experience, and then I actually got employed by, a company to build websites and do all that sort of stuff, my prices increased. So when you start out, you're very cheap. But obviously as you progress and progress quite rapidly, you can go from a junior engineer to a senior within 5 years. And that is a big jump salary wise as well. Starting off, so for me personally, as I said, because I was learning in my own time and studying and making sure that I could do things and honing my skills basically, outside of my day-to-day, like university work and college work and so on and so forth, I was able to go from university straight into a mid-weight role, which paid just over 50k. But generally speaking, a junior developer with pretty much no knowledge, just theory knowledge, to be honest, could walk into a job at 30k, if not a bit more. Because it's a specialized role, you have to have the knowledge to do something. You can't really go, oh, I'm going to shadow someone for 3 months or a month. It's not really like that. Most of my friends would tell you I was a hermit for like a good 2.5, 3 years because I did not leave my house. I had this ambition to, I wanted to be the best I could possibly be, and I didn't want to go to university so what you would typically study to be an engineer is computer science, and I didn't want to go to university for that because I'm a firm believer that going to university tends to kill your love for stuff, because you kind of start to mentally build relationships between, oh, I had to do this at uni and that was really a drag, and then it kind of demotivates you a bit for what you actually were passionate about to start off with. My biggest example is I went to university for accounting and finance because I believed I was going to become an accountant, but I'm sitting here today and I'm not an accountant. And I very much attribute that to university just kind of killing my passion for that sort of stuff. But luckily I did have the web development angle to go at. But again, back to the question, it's a lot of, you have to put a lot of time in. You can't kind of think you're just going to get by with with your kind of, you know, when you're younger, you can kind of pick up things really easily. But, you know, as you get older, you have to kind of, I mean, I've found this anyway, you have to kind of pick your thing and kind of push what you can into that thing and help it, you know, kind of blossom into a fruitful career at the end of the day. So while I was at university, I was building websites on the side and doing that sort of stuff. So what I actually did is I actually set up my own company, just so that I could, because I was earning quite a bit, I didn't want to get in trouble with the tax man or anything like that. So I set up my own business, and so I have my own business on the side, but then I also have my my actual day job, my 9 to 5, as it were. So when I left, I was working at a finance company, and I was building just landing pages, websites, different things for the different companies that they had in their portfolio. As I moved on from there, I moved on into an advertising company. So it was a WPP company, Group M, advertising agency, and I was building similar sort of stuff. But then it moved on to more internal tooling and single page applications, which are pretty much what everything is nowadays. You know, very fast, responsive applications that the internal teams at the company could use in order to help operations. And then from there I moved to a company called Foolproof, which was a UX UI design agency, and they needed developers in order to build out what they designed. So I moved there, and then from there I went to John Lewis, and I was at John Lewis for about 6 months, and we were basically a lot of what an engineer does is taking legacy code that a company has built up over time and not invested in properly, and well, nowadays anyway, and then they kind of bring people on board to help bring them into the future and bring them a bit more of a modern tech stack, as it were. So that was 6 months I was doing that, and then I got headhunted by Charlotte Tilbury, and I was working as a senior software engineer at Charlotte Tilbury for about a year and a half. And now I'm at Lick, a company called Lick, a home decor brand, and I'm the principal engineer there. I started off with CSS. It was easy to kind of get your head around, and that's styling. So anything, making a circle on a web page, center it, you know, making a square, changing the color, changing its position, and so on. Those sort of things. That's easy to kind of get your head around. And HTML. You need you need both of them together. And then I moved on to JavaScript, which is like it's the front end world, basically the front end of engineering. So that's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then from there, I've kind of dabbled with PHP, Java, and more back end languages, and they're more like server side languages. And so yeah, and I'm basically a full stack engineer, so I can touch the front end and the back end of whatever application needs to be built. UX is user experience and UI is user interface. So you typically, you wouldn't have just a standard graphic designer to design a website necessarily. You would get someone who specializes in UX and UI. And UX is user experience, so that's how a user will experience the website and how they would travel through the website. So if you had a e-commerce site, for example, and you wanted to get someone from the home page to a product listing page to a product detail page and then to buy, you would have a user experience designer to kind of design that flow and design how someone travels from A to B, basically. And then we'll have to build that as engineers. And then UI is the more kind of making it look glossy, making it look nice. And typically they're one in the same role, so you would have a UX and a UI designer and they do both things. But sometimes you have just a UI designer and sometimes you have just a UX designer. So I've been working with Gypsy Hill Brewing Company since they I think it was about a year after they actually started. It was a long time ago now, and I've kind of stayed on. So that's what I did in my business that I started during university. So I've kind of been with them since the start, and just to see them grow and blossom as a business, and like we've gone from even the pandemic last year to completely re-platforming the site and making sure that we could, you know, sell more and do more and scale, has been really great to be involved in. I very much prefer small businesses, if I'm totally honest. I think so. John Lewis is a huge company, Group M, huge company. In order to do anything, there's so much red tape just to get through, just in order to do one thing. If we need to do something because it's the best for the business, I don't want to necessarily travel through 10 chain of commands just in order to get something done. So it's a lot nicer working for small businesses. That's not to say that, you know, big businesses are not bad. I think there was a lot of job security when I was working at those places, because you kind of knew they were going to last. It wasn't like tomorrow John Lewis is just going to disappear. But you have that kind of, not that in the back of your mind, but when you're working at a small business, there is that possibility, because, you know, there's a lot less kind of bolstering them. Right now I work for a startup called Lick, and I don't really have that kind of, I don't feel job secure or anything like that. We're doing really well, but depending on the startup you join, you might have that kind of hesitation. All of my kind of career jobs have been PAYE. You can contract, and you could probably earn a lot more money contracting, but then I think me as a person, I get a bit too invested, I would say. So I find it hard, like even when I'm doing work for Gypsy Hill and it's only like a couple of months they need me to do something or something like that, I'm still on board. I'm still helping out, you know, free of charge. Obviously I don't always charge for my services, but a lot of other people are not like that. But like I said, I'm very attached, but there is a very lucrative kind of freelance and contract world out there for developers, and you can earn a lot more than I earn as a PAYE. I know I'm good at my job, so I don't need to signpost myself so much online and on social media. I don't want to be bound by something I said yesterday, when I could very much change my opinion. I like to hold the kind of stance of having a strong opinion but loosely held. So I like people to challenge me. I like people to say, you know, no, this is actually a better way of doing something. So I don't like to put stuff out into Twitter every 2 seconds and say things. I do check up on my timeline every now and again, because that's how you kind of pick up on new trends and stuff like that that's happening within the dev community. I'm also part of some Discord channels for devs. So now I tend to push people away now because I'm too busy. But typically it's word of mouth. Like, so, you know, I think when I was younger, it was taking out the yellow pages and calling a ton of people and saying like, do you need a website? Do you need a website? But now I'm at a point where, you know, people call me, ask me if I'm available, and I've got certain clients that I kind of make sure I've got time for, because they were with me from when I just started out. And yes, they don't pay the most, but you know, like I said, I get attached. So I like to make sure I'm keeping the people who are with me when I started out just as happy as people who come to me now. So I would say time management is always something that you need. I think good developers are make sure that they hit their deadlines. And then people skills. A lot of I think developers get a lot of flack for not being personable, and I think there's a big change now. I think there's a lot more devs coming through that can communicate and can talk to people, and it's an asset to you. You know, I think I've got far in my career because I can talk, and I'm not just going to sit in a corner and code all day. So that's definitely a key skill. And I would also say, like, attention to detail. I think as a developer, you need to make sure you're not exposing, you know, making buggy code. You don't want buggy code. You want to make sure you're being as particular as possible when it comes to writing certain things. So yeah, without getting too techie, you want to make sure as bug free as possible. Bugs happen, but you don't want the critical bugs happening so much. One of those weird kind of careers where you don't have to have any papers to say that you are qualified for X necessarily. Maybe if you're going to apply for Facebook or Google or something like that, maybe they do want to see a bit more kind of paperwork in that sense, and then maybe you do need a computer science degree or so forth. But you know, I have a friend that works at Facebook and he doesn't have that qualification. He has a degree in something completely different. So they're not looking at that necessarily. If you can pass the interview and get through, you are an engineer. It's not necessarily you have a piece of paper that says you got a first class or a 2-1 degree. Now you're an engineer. So to start off with, junior developers, about 30k. I know a few of my friends who started off on about 35k as junior developers, and like I said, like this is this is them not knowing much. This is them just messing about and building websites in their spare time and so on and so forth. So it's quite lucrative to begin with, and you can go from a junior to a senior within 5 years. I think a lot of people I know have done it within 5 years, and I would say you never stay at one company. You're not going to earn a lot if you stay at one company on that 30K, because typically companies have like rules about promotions and how much they can actually increase your salary. So some companies do a maximum of 20% increase, so you have to leave just to get the money that you deserve necessarily. So that's why my CV, like I remember growing up, my parents used to always say, oh, when you find a job, make sure you settle, make sure you don't bounce between jobs, and you don't want to look like that person. But the reality is, you will not get the pay you deserve if you don't leave a company. So, you could, for example, I stayed at my first job for just under a year, and I went from 50 and then I went to 60. And then I stayed at that job for 3 years and I never increased from 60. And then I left that job and got to 70. And then I left that job after a year and I got to 80. And then I left that job after a year, and so on and so forth. So you have to leave your job in order to get paid more. Don't expect someone to say, right, you're a junior now, you're now a mid. You apply for that mid role. Apply for it. If you get it, you are now a mid developer. You don't have to have someone tell you that you are a certain level. If you believe you are and you pass the interview, you're a mid developer. So that's kind of, you kind of have to have a bit of an ego and a bit of confidence in your own ability. I think when I stayed at a job for 3 years, that was Group M, it was because I was comfortable. It's because I was expecting my daughter. I wanted security, and I wanted stability. And it was actually more detrimental to me when I look back on it, because I kind of lost my self-worth as a worker and a software engineer. I thought that I wasn't as good as I was, and then it wasn't until I started interviewing and then I started getting all these roles and I got all these offers, I was like, oh, maybe I am good. Do you get what I mean? And that's kind of key. You don't want to stay somewhere too long where you kind of start to lose your self-worth. But I think that's the same case in every industry. You don't want to lose that. There is a lot of work you can do off your own accord. If you want to go for work experience, then I know that Google and Facebook, they have a lot of schemes for internships and stuff like that, which is great. I don't know many other companies that do internships necessarily for developers. They might do, but I think they're few and far between. You can start off as an engineer, but then I think as you kind of develop as an engineer, you kind of develop that kind of architectural way of kind of how I build something. So it's like, all right, Joel, you have to build this web page. Okay, I'll build this web page. You give me the design, I'll do it. But then what you're actually doing as you develop, as you kind of build that and actually develop in your career, you're learning how to structure content and structure a web page. And then you learn new things which help you structure that even better and help you architect things better. And then you might go to backend and you might have to, architect an API and how data flows from one place to another place. And then slowly but surely you realize that you're probably more of an architect than you were an engineer, and you're better at conceptualizing and planning out the work than you necessarily are doing it. So you can become a solutions architect, you can become, a CTO, a head of engineering, you can become a CTO, you can become a project manager, you become a UX designer. You might start coding and then realize you actually like design a lot more than you like to code. And that's a very good skill. Like for designers who can code or who have coded before in their life, that is a valuable skill. So you don't have to stay in engineering. You can very much travel between the realms of tech, though. It's not necessarily that you're going to go, oh, I'm a developer now, I'm going to be a landscape gardener. It doesn't necessarily work like that. But there are a lot of different roles within tech. Every company has a website. Every industry needs it. I've worked in retail, makeup, advertising, and finance. And now I'm back in retail, and I'm not bound by necessarily retail. Like I don't have to work for John Lewis, Sainsbury's, and all those brands. I can work for whatever company I want to work for, because they all need engineers. They all need to build stuff. So yeah, I think there's a lot of even if you're kind of fed up with e-commerce and selling things online, you can move into maybe banking and building some internal tools for banks and apps and apps for mobile banking and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different avenues that you can go from being an engineer. An amazing amount of freedom. In my I think about 13, 14 years I've been doing it, I've traveled the world, literally. I've gone to Dubai, I've gone to California, I've gone to Australia, I've gone to loads of places, and it's Europe as well. But I go there anyway, so it's not so cool. But you'd think that being a developer means that you kind of just sit at a computer all day and you don't really need to interact with people, but there is still a need for human interaction. So the free code camp, that's a good one to get started. And there's also a website called Udemy. You have to pay for the courses, but if you find a good instructor, they're good courses. I think one huge takeaway from this is that you don't have to have the qualifications, and I think I really want to hit home with that one. I think there's a lot of pressure on young people to make sure they've got their qualifications, make sure you do well at school. I don't necessarily think I did that great at school, but I picked the thing I wanted to do relatively early, and no one at school kind of taught me it. No one at school pushed it, and I think that's quite sad. I think they might be pushing it a lot more now. It's been a long time since I was at secondary school, but just stick at it. And if you have to forsake a couple of times going out with your friends, it's much more. It's better for you in the long run. It's nice to know that you can be debt free, or and not have to worry about money when you're in your mid-20s. When a lot of your friends might be worrying about that sort of stuff because they haven't made the right career moves earlier on.